Hey everyone, it's John here again. What I wanted to show you today is the thickness gauge here, the Smartor A-Scan thickness gauge. We're going to break down grid maps in from small grids to quite complex large grids using 1D, 2D and 3D grid patterns. Let's break it down for you a little bit now. Okay, so we're in the main menu for thickness gauging. So we go into the standard mode and we want to set up our data. So in this data point, we will set up that there is. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll set up for 1D grid mapping. So that's talking about one row and multiple columns. So that's that's position A, B1, C1, D1, E1, and we can go through, and this is quite standard how everyone does their grid maps, where they will take a measurement, they'll move up, and then they'll take another recording of multiple measurements moving up the grid, and then they'll stitch it at the back end in their Excel software. Now that's okay if we're just doing very basic thickness readings along one cardinal point, but if we wanted to do multiple rows, multiple columns, we'll change this over to 2D. And so now we can say, okay, well, this is one row with 5 columns, but we want to add 2 rows, 3 rows, 4, 5 rows. And so that now in this 2D mapping, we can now create multiple rows, multiple columns with one reading per point. Let me show you what normal thickness testing in grid pattern number 1 might be. So you'll move from A1 to B1 to C1, and then you go back to row A again and move to position 2, and then B2 and C2 for reading 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and you just continue out along the number of rows and columns that you've got. What you might do over the longer distances, if you can't reach something that's nice and close, a grid map that's nice and small and within your arm's reach, you might change it to grid pattern number 3, where you'll take the first reading, the second, the third, and the consecutive readings and the different rows, when you get to the end, and you might be a half a meter, 1 meter, or you could be 6 meters away. And then you may move into the next row and come back through the columns. Reading 4, 5, and 6 may come all the way back to where you started. Now that's not too bad if you're you can walk and you can access everything nice and easily. Let me show you another couple of patterns. See, pattern 4 doesn't start in A1, it actually starts in this example, C2, so the bottom right-hand corner, and then it walks its way back. So depending on your start position, you can have a grid pattern that your start and finish positions end up in different places. This starts in the right-hand corner, moves up, and it's moved down to the left, and then up again, down to the left, and up again. Grid pattern 6. Grid pattern 7 starts on the top left, move down all your columns, moves to the right row, moves vertically up through the columns, moves to the right, and starts down, going down again all the way to the bottom. So there's about 8 preset grid patterns working in different locations that will help you with setting up multiple grid patterns over small or large areas. Okay, let's go from 2D off to 3D grid patterns, where we have multiple rows and multiple columns. And you can normally, like our 2D grid map, we can have 1 point per location, or in this option with 3D, we can now have 2 test points per grid. So if your grids are large, a couple of inches, 5 by 5, or larger, you might want to take multiple readings per location before you move to the next grid point. And so with this feature, we can now take 2 readings. So you may take one in the top left and one in the bottom right of each grid location and set it with 2. And again, you've actually got the option of having different patterns. But these patterns take into account that you've set up multiple points per grid location. So reading 1, reading 2, you move to the right, reading 3, 4, 5, 6, and then following this pattern, you can move and continue like that. So this is very good if you're doing a small grid, but if you're doing, for example, rope access and you're doing a bin liner, you may need to rappel all the way down, and it might be more effective to actually scale the bin back to the top, move over a column, and then start rappelling back down as you take your grid readings. And you can do this without trying to radio anybody else. You can make sure that the grid pattern, let's show that grid pattern. Okay, in grid pattern 3D, pattern number 5 for rope access on large bin liners, you may take 1 or you may take multiple readings per grid location. As you rappel down the column, you'll take more readings, you get to the bottom, and then you may go back to the top of the bin liner, move over a column, and then start rappelling back down again, go back to the top. Using this grid pattern for every thickness reading that you've got will format it effectively here in the device. So when you export it off to your device or your computer or your laptop and start preparing the reports, the Excel file raw data is already formatted for you, ready to go. So you can have pictures of your bin liners, you can have your mapped data and your readings exactly where you want them.